How my people, and welcome back to the Fandom Zone podcast. I'm one of your co-hosts, DJ Nick, back in the Fandom Zone this time to discuss some more Loki with my fabulous co-host, amazing friend, and the man who always makes me smile and is a joy to podcast with, my brother from another mother, Mr. Charles Skaggs. Hey Charles, how are you today?
I'm doing great, Nick, who remains. How are you today?
I'm doing well. Really been looking forward to discussing this episode with you, Charles. As I mentioned to you before we kind of started recording, had a little bit of a interesting night at a faux blues band club. Band I was supposed to listen to was blues and turned out to not to come as advertised. But other than that, just super happy to be podcasting with you and looking forward to discussing this episode. And I'm sure there'll be a lot of theories. Some things we were partially right, so it's going to be interesting to see when it comes to this. And you must be feeling happy as well when it comes to certain theories we've had all season long.
We can feel a little smug about things that we call from the beginning, but there's some things that I think there's still a lot of questions that need to be answered after this season 1 finale of Loki. We can call it the season 1 finale now.
Yeah, and what, of course, Charles is alluding to is we did get confirmation that there will be a Loki season 2, and I'm so excited about this, Charles.
Yes, and there was much rejoicing.
The only sad note, I think, is that Kate Herron won't be returning as director, which is a bit of a shame, and you wonder why, but I guess she maybe did what she had to do, and she's passing the torch on to another director, I guess.
Or maybe she was just tired of dealing with Marvel, you don't know, or just exhausted from the ordeal, didn't want to commit to another 6 episodes like that again, who knows. So yeah, that's very concerning that Kate Herron's not returning, but hopefully we'll get a director that's equally up to the task as much as she was.
We can definitely cross our fingers and hope for sure. So here at episode 225, we are discussing the 6th and final episode of Loki season 1, entitled For All Time Always. As we mentioned, of course, there will be a season 2. This episode is was that, and written by Michael Waldron, who had written the first episode, Glorious Purpose, so it kind of bookends the season nicely. And is the creator of the show, not to mention, as we have said before, co-writer of the upcoming Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. And along with Mr. Waldron for the ride in the writer's room is Eric Martin, who had written the 4th episode of this season, the Nexus event. And seeing this first season through in director's chair is, of course, Kate Herron for the last time. Hopefully she'll return on some other project, but she's done with Loki for the foreseeable future anyways. So, before we get to our trivia and topics, Charles, what were your general thoughts on this finale, which apparently was rather polarizing amongst both critics and fans, from what I saw on social media and the interwebs?
Well, I think once again we have a finale that's essentially a big exposition dump. And setting up things for down the road. Future movies, future TV shows, another season of Loki, as it turns out. So, consequently, we don't get a definitive conclusion here. Things aren't all nice and wrapped up in a neat bow. And I'm sure for a certain segment of Marvel Cinematic Universe fans, there wasn't a big slugfest throwdown, superpowered blitzkrieg, where all kinds of special effects or heavy action-packed sequences. So consequently, it was mostly talking. And as a result, I think that it probably felt underwhelming to that segment. Now, me personally, I enjoyed the drama. I really found it intriguing. With a lot of, I love timey-wimey stories. I love time travel stories. I love, just the quantum mechanics of it, and find that very intriguing. So therefore, I was all about this. I love the fact that we got the introduction of a major player, and we got the introduction of a certain Jonathan Majors, who is introduced here as He Who Remains, but of course is, as we know, going to be playing Kang, one of the variants of He Who Remains, as we find out, in the upcoming movie Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. So that should be very intriguing, and I thought it was a very solid introduction for Jonathan Majors to be introduced into the Marvel Cinematic Universe this way. What about you, Nick?
Oh, I'm right there with you. And yes, that's the kind of sort of, should I say, criticisms that I saw on the interwebs and also from folks on social media and stuff is either they found that it was, like you said, too dialogue heavy, or they were mentioning things like, why is this yet another setup for a Marvel movie? And people weren't happy about that. But I kind of have to say to that is, the fact that everything's all connected, they kind of have to be lead-ups to the Marvel movies because, and once again, you can't please everybody. Because if it's not connected, there'll be folks who are like, why isn't this canon or why isn't this connected? If it is connected, it's like, oh, it's another setup for a movie. So
exactly.
You always have the two parties fighting for all eternity, I feel. but other than that, no, I really
the
enjoyed
multiversal war of fandom.
Yes.
When it comes to Marvel Cinematic Universe TV shows, I guess.
I think, it's very hard to, as I said, make everybody happy. But I'm just like you. I love the whole timey-wimey stuff. I'm a sucker for good dialogue, and I really think that Michael Waldron and Eric Martin did a fabulous job with the dialogue in this, and also kept it interesting, not to mention, of course, the performances from our actors, because had you had it maybe done a little bit more dryly, it probably could have been incredibly boring when it's just three people in a room talking. But just the way it's done, and, of course, we'll talk more about Jonathan Majors in that sense, but I just absolutely was so happy with this, and can't wait for season 2, and just so excited for the next step in the MCU. Maybe I'm easy to please, I don't know, but I was just super excited with everything we got in this.
What's wrong with you for enjoying a TV show, Nick? There's something seriously wrong with you.
There is.
Because
I'm just overly
how
optimistic.
dare you enjoy something? And it boggles my mind that so-called fans aren't fans of what they. Granted, you don't have to appreciate everything you're given. I get that. But for a lot of these people, I don't think anything makes them happy. They find fault with everything, and nothing is good enough. Nothing is good enough as the headcanon in their minds. Mm-hmm. So consequently, they don't get what they want. So therefore, that means, in their heads at least, that it's not good enough.
Which, in fact, we've touched up on multiple times. If you kind of set yourself up for failure, if you're like, oh, this is how it's going to pan out, and then it doesn't, and as you said, the frustration sets in, and then the nerd rage sets in, and then it's one big mess, and then you go trolling on the interwebs and expressing your frustration to the universe. So
and then that frustration just feeds off each other because you get like-minded people, and it just snowballs. It has a snowball effect.
Mm-hmm. Very much so. So yeah, all in all, I'm right there with you, and obviously we'll see how this reflects when it comes to our ratings later on in this episode. And when it comes to cast and trivia, aside of course from our regular players, we did get the debut of, like we're mentioning, a man who will ostensibly play a major role in the MCU going forward when it comes to...
I see what you did there. Major role. I see what you did there.
Exactly. I had to milk it for what it was worth. And yes, that is yet another Lovecraft Country alumni, Jonathan Majors, as He Who Remains. And folks, Jonathan, amongst other things, was in multiple great things in the highly acclaimed 2020 Spike Lee film The Five Bloods. And, of course, aside from Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania, he will also be appearing in Creed 3 for you Rocky fans. And so he's definitely a star on the rise. He hasn't, shall we say, been around for that long, but I think he's already getting recognition. I'm so happy, as you and I talked about, that these great actors from Lovecraft Country are getting so much work and being recognized for the talents they are.
Well, Jonathan Majors also was nominated for an Emmy this past week for his role on Lovecraft Country. So kudos to him.
Fabulous. Definitely very well deserved. And when it actually comes to He Who Remains in the comics, well, we'd actually touched up on him in previous episodes. Granted, he's very different here compared to the comics. in the 616 Comics universe. He's literally in charge of the TVA, creator of the Timekeepers, and has had some encounters with some Marvel heroes, in particular Thor and Jane Foster, way back in 1976 in Thor issue 245. And obviously, unlike here, he's not a variant of Kang, but more on that later. And when it comes to you, Charles, did you have anything you wanted to share with our listeners, either Kang or He Who Remains or any other great stuff?
Well, you pretty much talked about He Who Remains as far as the comics go. So I did want to mention Kang the Conqueror, because obviously this sets up Kang rather neatly in a way, because at the very least we get, at the very end of the episode, we'll talk about this, we get a very interesting statue that looks very much like Kang the Conqueror. So, and we got a lot of teasing that there were variants of He Who Remains that aren't very, very nice. So, and especially one of them possibly, the He Who Remains being referenced as a conqueror was mentioned in this episode. So we probably should talk about Kang the Conqueror and okay, who is this guy? So if you're not familiar with the comics, Kang the Conqueror first appeared as Kang, and this is an important distinction here, as in the Avengers Volume 1, Number 8. But his real name is Nathaniel Richards, who may possibly be the 31st century descendant of a certain Reed Richards, a.k.a. Mr. Fantastic of the Fantastic Four. And Nathaniel Richards became fascinated with history, discovered the time travel technology created by, the Fantastic Four's arch enemy, Doctor Doom. And he traveled back in time to ancient Egypt aboard a Sphinx-shaped time ship and became the Pharaoh Rama-Tut. And Rama-Tut's rule, however, was cut short when he was defeated by the time-displaced Fantastic Four in Fantastic Four Volume 1, Number 19, which was, I believe, I'm not sure how close it was around that time. I'm not sure which came first. But ultimately, the two characters were revealed to be the same character.
Yeah, I think it was shortly after that, I believe, they made that reveal.
Yeah, so he later designed an armor based on Doctor Doom's, and then he tried to return to the 31st century, but overshot by 1,000 years, discovering, because like you do, it was whoops, and discovered a war-torn Earth that used advanced weapons that they no longer understood. He found it very simple to conquer the planet, expanding his dominion throughout the galaxy, and reinvented himself as, you guessed it, Kang the Conqueror. So this guy's had multiple aliases. However, the future world was dying, so Kang decided, okay, maybe I'll take over Earth, but earlier in the timeline, when it was more fertile. So that took him back to the 20th century and the 21st century, where he's had multiple conflicts with the Avengers.
Yep.
So that's the deal with Kang. And there's been a lot of timey-wimey stories involved with Kang, some of them very, very complex. And so if your head hurts just thinking about this stuff, I understand that. But it seems like Kang is being set up to be the Thanos of Marvel Phase 4 going forward.
I very much think so, too.
So you need to pay attention to this guy if you're a Marvel Cinematic Universe fan.
Yes, very much so. And Charles, did you have any other sort of Easter eggs or trivia before we get to our topics?
Well, there was a little bit, and I'm glad you mentioned that. When there's a scene, and we'll probably talk about it a little bit, where Hunter B-15 goes back to the town of Fremont, Ohio. Which we find out is actually the town where Ravonna came from before she became Ravonna, a member of the TVA. And if you're just a little bit of trivia on Fremont, Ohio, because, hey, I'm an Ohio guy, obviously. So it's kind of like my duty here to talk about this. Fremont, Ohio is in northern Ohio, just 25 miles from the very famous amusement park Cedar Point in Sandusky, Ohio. Ooh. If you're a big amusement park geek, you probably heard of Cedar Point. And is also the home of Rutherford B. Hayes, the 19th president of the United States from 1877 to 1881. So,
wow.
So, if you're a history buff, I guess, or a U.S. history buff, U.S. presidential buff, that's, I guess, Fremont, Ohio's claim to fame, being the president or the hometown of a president that hardly anyone remembers here in America. Rutherford B. Hayes.
I believe he's actually name-checked in The Simpsons of the less-known presidents. You know when the kids are doing the little sketch of, we're the lesser-known presidents.
Yes. Well, he's only a one-termer. He only lasted 4 years, so it's makes him a little bit more easily forgotten, I guess, in the annals of history. But, good on you, Fremont, Ohio, for getting a president. So
exactly.
Can't take that away from you.
and I love that you...
And apparently you also gave us Ravona in the process.
There you go. And isn't it curious that of late, Ohio is very much becoming like the MCU's belly button. Everything happens there, I think it's fabulous.
Yeah, we talked about this on Happiness and Darkness, that Ohio is now officially the burial place of Natasha Romanoff from, a.k.a. the Black Widow, the original Black Widow from the Avengers. So, yeah, Ohio has got some MCU game, So it's your turn, DC, to represent.
Make your move.
That's right. OHIO.
Well, I guess it's living up to its nickname, the heart of it all. So I guess in the MCU world, it's becoming slowly but surely the heart of it all. And I'm so happy. New York got a lot of love, or the state of New York, and now I think it's time for some of the Midwest, if you will, and stuff to get some love too.
Yes, believe it or not, there are other states in the United States besides New York and California.
Crazy concept.
Or Texas and Florida, just saying. So,
yes. Yeah. The country does cover literally a whole freaking continent, folks. Right. So yes, there are other states around.
Yeah, there's 46 other states besides those 4 I mentioned. So, and we just happen to be one of them.
Exactly. So definitely kudos to good old Ohio for sure.
Right.
So I guess at this point then we can move on to our topics then, Charles, if you don't have any sort of other things that we may have missed. Okay.
That's all I have. Alrighty. Go for it.
Well, then we have 4 topics today. Starting, of course, off, we have topic number 1, which I've entitled Thanos Who. Here, of course, to kind of give you guys a little bit of a recap of what kind of happens, of course, Loki and Sylvie find themselves at the gates of what will be known as the Citadel, in what is very reminiscent, at least to me, of like this live-action, dilapidated Disney castle.
Yeah,
like
the Citadel at the end of time. You got to give it the full name, right? Because it's much more impressive than just the Citadel. It's the Citadel at the end of time.
End of time. Yes. Agreed.
Which actually did appear in Marvel Comics in 245, Thor number 245.
45.
Yep.
Correct. Yeah. And I mean, I don't know about you, Charles, when we actually got to see this, it kind of made me think of either, as I said, this almost dilapidated Disney castle, like say from Sleeping Beauty, or it also gave me very strong Harry Potter vibes. It's almost like a very kind of dark version of Harry Potter. It's like Voldemort has taken over, and this is kind of what it looks like. And then we, of course, get that very sort of horror mystery in fashion where the doors open and shut behind them, Loki and Sylvie, in a rather ominous fashion.
Yeah. Yet, before it's the haunted Citadel at the end of time, too.
That's right.
Instead of the haunted mansion, that's what it is. It's the haunted Citadel.
I was kind of hoping to hear like Thriller suddenly play. And now I want to go back and watch the Thriller video. But anyways, anyway, my love for Michael.
Ghouls from every tomb are closing in to seal your doom.
I love it. I absolutely love it. Yeah, of course. So they enter, of course, the Citadel. Before encountering the man behind everything, Sylvie and Loki meet a familiar anthropomorphic clock. Miss Minutes shows up out of nowhere. Mm-hmm. And of course, she basically gives them the rundown of, talking about He Who Remains, and they can have what they've always wanted, and He Who Remains can do it for them, and he's kind of like the guy who can make everything right for you. And she's, I think, almost like acting as his sales rep, if you will. She's kind of offering them, you can have this all and much more. Right. All you have to do is sign on the dotted line, and you'll get a mystery gift as well. And
a box full of rice-a-roni, the San Francisco treat.
That's right. So, we kind of called this a little bit. We kind of theorized that Miss Minutes might make an appearance. Granted, of course, she's not the villain. But what did you think of this appearance of Miss Minutes? And should we say this brief kind of talk between her, Sylvie, and Loki, and then her literally offering them what they've always wanted?
Well, I thought it was interesting because, for one thing, Tara Strong, if you noticed, kind of put a little more sinister edge on her Miss Minutes voice.
She did, yeah.
Talking about how, the He Who Remains can make that happen for you, and consequently it felt more, like I said, sinister overtones. I know a lot of people were wondering if Miss Minutes was the one behind it all. Well, apparently, sort of, I guess. At least she knows a guy, and...
She's like his henchwoman, if you will.
Or like the major domo, I guess, here. Yeah. So, she's the guy she's the screener, the one that gives you you have to get past her to get to He Who Remains, apparently. So, as a result, she makes this offer, but Loki and Sylvie don't take her up on that, and she's essentially this big temptation for them. Like, hey, you guys can, Loki, you can get what you want. You can win the Battle of New York. You can rule Asgard. You can kill Thanos. Be on the throne. Oh, hey, you want that Infinity Gauntlet? We could totally hook you up with that. But, and Sylvie, you can finally get those lifetime of happy, normal memories that were denied you by Ravonna and when you were pruned from the timeline. So obviously this is like, this is a big temptation for both of them, but they, to their credit, they both say, nope, sorry, not interested. We just want to talk to the guy in charge. So get your little CGI behind out of the way, and let's make this happen.
Oh, very much so. And I agree with you. I definitely have to compliment Tara Strong on the voice work once again because, as you said, that's extra sinister thing. And the animation, I think, as well, works wonders for that too because she is granted, it's just literally an anthropomorphic clock. Mm-hmm. But she's very expressive and Tara's voice matched with the animation works so, so well. And I think a lot of people kind of saw this coming a little bit because she's constantly there. And the fact that she was also kind of stalling for time in the previous episode and everything else, kind of like, oh, I'm going to get there and everything else just seemed like there was more to it.
It was very suspicious.
I guess we kind of saw that coming. And I think it was a nice little appetizer before we actually got to the main course, i.e., of course, He Who Remains. And I thought it was just a great tease because I was like, I really want to get this. Who is it going to be? Is it going to be Jonathan Majors? Who's going to, and we were like, get out of the way, you dumb clock. Give us.
So you were just very impatient by this point. You're like, I don't care about you, Miss Minutes. I just want to see the big bad already. Bring him on.
It's a very odd comparison, but it was like, it reminds me way back when I used to play Duck Hunt on the Nintendo Entertainment System on the NES with like the little gun. And I would be like, get out of the way, you stupid dog. I want the ducks. I have to shoot the ducks in. So that kind of frustration, I actually was trying to shoot the dog because I wanted him to get out of the way and wanted to shoot the duck. Yes, DJ Nick has issues, folks. Major ones.
Apparently, apparently, I don't think you should be allowed dogs. Because you'll shoot them in the process of trying to get ducks.
Exactly. This is why your Italian co-host is a cat person. Now you know.
I think that's probably a wise thing. That's a wise call. All right.
Very true.
Okay. Now I'm looking at you a little, a little skeptically here. A little side eye, perhaps.
I'm a nice guy. I try to be, anyways.
He's a nice boy.
I try to. Most
He's
of the
a
time.
good boy.
As I said, most of the time, at least when I'm sleeping, I am. But moving forward, after, of course, this rather creepy...
Can't kill dogs while you're sleeping, apparently.
Exactly. I can't be bad to people. So there you go. But yeah. So moving on, of course, after their rather creepy
Nick,
exchange
tell
with
me about
Mr.
your mother. No.
Oh no. Mom, if you're listening to this, I have no, shall we say, evil thoughts towards you whatsoever. So it's all good.
Let me just write this down and make some notes.
No, and no surprise, Charles is actually using a blue pen today, which I think is actually very thematic there. Very well played. You can't see it, listeners, but Charles is doing the whole psychiatrist thing with a blue pen. So very much in theme with today's episode.
Yep.
So anyways, as we move forward, after, of course, this exchange with Miss Minutes, Loki and Sylvie enter this rather dingy and ill-lit room where we finally meet the puppet master himself. And this is where I guess a large part of the episode will be played out, because essentially he who remains sits our two heroes down eventually and gives them an explanation which reminded me, I don't know about you, Charles, it reminded me a little bit of the architect's speech in The Matrix. When he's kind of giving the whole...
The Matrix Revolution, The Matrix Reloaded at the very end.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that's what a lot of people were thinking of that, because that was a big disappointment to a lot of Matrix fans, because we get all this buildup, and at the very end of The Matrix Reloaded, it's this big info dump, this big monologue. You know, he's monologuing, to use an Incredibles term. So... Yeah. He just goes on, and you're just like, okay, this is not what I signed up for. I signed up for, like, Neo, downloading some kung fu and kicking this guy's ass. Why didn't I, what is this? And I'm sure Marvel Cinematic Universe fans maybe in the scene, these sequences felt kind of similar, perhaps. Yeah,
that was kind of the vibe I got, because especially when he explains the whole thing that, one, he's using the TVA and Alioth to keep the sacred timeline flowing as he sees fit in order to avoid the universe falling into yet another multiversal war. And, we just go, of course, the concept that the war was once a time waged by different Kang variants who united for the good of every universe, only to betray one another and fight for one timeline supremacy. And in the comics, this alliance was actually called the Council of Kangs. Mm-hmm. And these guys have been around for centuries, so it probably was alluding to the whole concept of the Council of Kangs. And he remains, pardon me, even alludes to this in the episode, because he says, I've been a ruler, a conqueror, he who remains a jerk. So we kind of get the whole rundown of that. And at the same time...
And he really emphasizes the word conqueror.
Yes, we noticed that
he's very theatrical, and he's like, conqueror. He draws it out.
I think had it been the subtitles, you probably would have seen conqueror in bold face, because it's like he really emphasizes that. Mm-hmm. And at the same time, he goes on to say that he has made it so that Loki and Sylvie will ultimately get to the Citadel, yet he does not know from then on how things will play out, as after all, we are at the end of time, which still has to be written. So when it came to our big reveal here of Jonathan Majors making this guest appearance, Charles, what did you make of him and, the whole sort of story we get with him and Loki and Sylvie?
Well, a lot of, even the character himself, he who remains, or maybe we should say himself who remains, he makes this comment as like that he knows that he wasn't what Loki and Sylvie expected once they got here. Because once they go into, like the Citadel, and I gotta give points to the set designer on this, because once again we get a gorgeous looking set.
Beautiful.
I don't know if they just kind of borrowed elements, what was left over from Agatha's set in WandaVision or not, but regardless, it looked gorgeous. That there's all this detail on the flooring, the walls, it was built for just this wonderful scene. And Jonathan Majors, we talked about how he could have been, we were theorizing that maybe the person at this Citadel that Loki and Sylvie were going to was possibly Immortus.
Correct.
Which was the future incarnation of Kang. Mm-hmm. And what we get is essentially a combination. He Who Remains is essentially a combination of He Who Remains, the comic book character, and a little bit of Immortus thrown in, but also with Jonathan Majors, the way he approached this character was, almost like a very much a trickster-like character.
Yeah.
He's enjoying himself. Sylvie keeps trying to behead him, decapitate him with her sword, but because of He Who Remains knowing exactly what she's going to do the moment before she does it, he's very easily able to, dodge her blows, her strikes, and just kind of taunts her with that. He's very playful. He's very theatrical. Like I said, there's points where he's like crawling up on top of his desk and just really, I don't want to say hamming it up, but just really chewing the scenery here.
Mm-hmm.
So trying to make, what is this, like I said, essentially a big, huge info dump more interesting. Because you're like, okay, this guy's like prowling the entire room. So I think it helped to try to liven up what could have been a very stiff monologue delivered by someone else. But he goes through the process of unpacking his story. He talks about how he was a scientist eons ago on 31st century Earth who discovered that there were these other universes that were similar yet distinct. And he essentially contacted his counterparts. Who they were all getting along at first. They were sharing technology, making things better across all their timelines and multiverses. Everything was cool, but as it turned out, not all of them were nice guys.
Exactly.
And as a result, some of those decided, well, hey, those new worlds meant, hey, I can conquer this. And presumably one of those guys is Kang the Conqueror. So they all turn on each other. There was this big fight that essentially became this big multiversal war. And this is where they kind of like the timekeepers came in to save all of them, saying that their reality was, that just one of what the variants discovered. And He Who Remains used Alioth. He talks about, Alioth, the smoke monster from Lost that we talk about in our previous episode. Essentially, he weaponized him and used him to consume time and space, essentially treating him as almost like an atomic bomb designed to end the multiversal war.
Yeah.
So he created the TVA to kind of keep all this cosmic harmony, maintaining this one sacred timeline that would keep everybody safe. So he's like, okay, this is what I did. So the question is, what do you want to do? Because now I'm kind of tired of all this. I've been doing it for an extremely long time. And as it turns out, I think I have not one, but two Lokis that could be my successors.
Yeah.
So what did you make of that?
Well, I thought it was curious because you assumed that obviously he has been around forever, and the fact that he literally, and I think, and he almost seems excited about the fact that he doesn't know what's going to happen next.
Right.
He almost loves the unpredictability because, and it also seems that either choice he gives them, he'll win anyway. Because if you kill him, multiple variants of him will come out, and everything will start all over again. and if they don't kill him, he'll have his nice cushy little place. While upstairs, Sylvie and Loki are running stuff for him. So for him, it's kind of a win-win situation, I think. And obviously, being a villain, you're not going to have a scenario where you lose. You're always going to have a fail-safe. And I think that's what He Who Remains has in this case. I thought it was a very interesting concept that he would want to entrust this to Loki and Sylvie, because they also are incredibly unpredictable. And, they might not be necessarily... I think they're getting a bit more level-headed, but they're not necessarily as level-headed. I could see a Captain America run the timeline, because he's much more, if you will, level-headed, and it's not like... I could see Loki and Sylvie getting incredibly bored with a job like running the TVA. It's like, this is so predictable, it's so boring, and everything else. So it just would not fit their MO. But I love that concept that they're kind of being given this choice. And, of course, it sets Sylvie and Loki off on showing that they have different agendas and different objectives, because Sylvie, of course, wants to kill. He Remains. Loki's like, oh, heck no, I don't want a multiversal war on my hands.
Well, He Who Remains also goes through these big manipulations throughout this episode. He tries to sow these little seeds of division between Sylvie and Loki, saying that, well, keeps bringing up Loki's manipulation, and that's his fallback position, is to manipulate and lie. And with Sylvie, he knows that she doesn't trust anybody. So, here's Loki who can't be trusted, and Sylvie who can't trust anybody. So he's pitting them against each other in the process of saying he wants them as his successors. So he's essentially playing this game, and he's rigging it in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And he's trying to manipulate events, and he's probably trying to see if Sylvie will kill him, which she does.
Yes, exactly. Inevitably after she doesn't. And I think it also might really be that He Who Remains is bored as well, in the sense that he's lived so long, he's kind of seen the timeline come and go, finally some unpredictability, and I think he really sort of almost needed that entertainment. Because the guy's living alone, literally. He doesn't have anybody aside probably from Miss Minutes. I don't know if he hangs out with Miss Minutes.
Right.
But ostensibly he is alone in this kind of tower, if you will. And he actually has people to visit him. So there's like excitement because he doesn't know what's going to happen. So I think it also, and that's why I think it also maybe justifies the nervous energy that he has. Because he's probably been alone for so long. And it might almost be that maybe madness has set in, literally, because he's been alone and isolated.
Yeah, that's what Loki postulates. He's like, he's obviously insane, but so I think the isolation, the lack of social contact, possibly has obviously sent him over the edge. So essentially, what you have is a very dangerous combination. You have an extremely powerful being who just also happens to be nuts. So not a great combo. And
not at all.
No. Essentially, vast power and just someone very unhinged at the helm. Yeah, historically that has proven to be not the greatest combination, needless to say, especially here in the United States recently. But
or you think of Germany in the 30s.
Or Germany in the 30s, exactly. Another great another great example. But I thought it was interesting because He Who Remains, he's, like you said, he is tired of this. Like you said, he also relishes these unpredictable moments. There's one part where he says, I'm paraphrasing here, that we've crossed the Rubicon, and I don't know what's going to happen next. So everything at this point is unpredictable to him, and he finds that exciting, that lack of not knowing. So it would almost be, to use a different comic book character, Dr. Manhattan. Dr. Manhattan seems to know everything because he exists in all time, in all various points in time. So if he was somehow taken out of time so that he didn't know something, he would probably find that very exciting and challenging.
Yeah, which might also account for maybe Dr. Manhattan being the way he is, because somebody's like, yes, I know what's going to happen.
Right. I knew you were going to say that. I knew this was going to happen. Yes, I got it. I got the concept. Yes.
And that's why I think maybe he is so over the top, because as we mentioned, it could be like cabin fever has set in, and so he's like totally nuts about it. And I think it's also to Jonathan Major's credit, it shows his range, because you're wondering now how his Kang will be, which will probably be much more cold and calculated, and maybe not this highly energized, almost incredibly nervous, kind of just all over the place kind of guy. I mean, this guy seems the kind of chap who like maybe snorted cocaine early and just like totally bouncing, kind of like he kind of reminded me of Al Pacino for some reason in some of his multiple movies.
Scarface,
like
perhaps. Yeah.
In Scarface, exactly. It made me think literally of him. It was kind of that moment where he's like so high. He's like, I'm high kind of thing. So he's like totally out of it. And,
I think I'm high!
Thank you, Charles. I was looking forward to that. I had to get you and give you an excuse to play that track.
Anytime.
But yeah, so that's also the thing. So, I mean, I know maybe some folks might have found it overly over the top, but like you said, if you played it straight, you'd probably bore your audience because you're setting up the multiversal war, you're setting up so many concepts, but you have to make it interesting.
Exactly, and that's what Jonathan Majors, I think, was trying to do. He's trying to make this big info dump interesting. So consequently, he's doing everything he can as an actor, physically, the way he's using the cadence, ironically, of his voice, which is now failing me. He's using every trick in the book to sell this scene and make it lively and interesting because essentially what all he's doing is talking to Loki and Sylvie, who are sitting in their chair with their swords in their right hand, both of their right hands crossed over their legs, just sitting there waiting, taking all this in. So, only broken up by occasional threats from Sylvie to kill him. So, consequently, it had to be presented in a different way. And I think, to Jonathan Majors' credit, he succeeds at that. He makes He Who Remains, and I think we're going to see this, like you said, with Kang, distinct from Kang. Kang is going to, I think, obviously be much more menacing and threatening, like in a Thanos kind of way.
Yeah.
Than, say, a He Who Remains kind of way. I think all these various, if Jonathan Majors ends up playing Immortus, perhaps, later on, like I said, that future incarnation of Kang, I'm guessing Immortus will also have a very different, distinct persona than Kang or He Who Remains.
And it would be a great, showcase for Jonathan Majors to just show his range.
Yeah.
And heck, it might work for him in the futures. Future directors might see him do saying, "Oh, I really like what he did there. I have to call him up to do a certain role." And so I think it also demands a very versatile actor to do something like that.
And as an actor, you relish the chance to chew that scenery. And Jonathan Majors probably jumped at that. Here.
Oh, I'm sure, because you can really tell. I think he's having a good time while doing it.
Yeah,
so I think he was enjoying it. So, anything else on this particular, should we say, moment of the episode and He Remains before we go forward, Charles?
No, I don't think so. I mean, unless you want to get into Sylvie killing him, or do you want to wait on that?
That's actually going to be going into our next topic. So I just wanted to kind of check with you before we got to that big point.
Go for it.
Okay.
Yep.
So then moving forward then, we do have topic number 2, which is entitled Sylvie versus Loki. He Who Remains, as Charles was pointing out, basically leaves our two Lokis with a choice. Kill him, and thus risking a multiversal war and unleashing countless versions of Kangs out there, or go back and take over the TVA themselves. And here, of course, are our two characters who are at odds, with Sylvie hellbent on wanting to kill He Who Remains, which has pretty much been her purpose all along. And Loki, rather than wanting to pursue his dreams of glory, wanting to prevent a potential multiversal war. And so, of course, a fight ensues as He Who Remains kind of watches on, seemingly entertained by what he's witnessing.
Yes.
So when it actually came
to our...
Dance
for me, little puppets, dance.
That's exactly what was going through my mind. So when it came to our lovers' tiff, let's say, where the two are literally fighting it out, what did you make of this kind of, should we say, this moment where their objectives are at odds?
Yeah, I thought it was compelling and a little sad because obviously I know the shippers were, hoping for those two crazy kids, Loki and Sylvie, to stay together. Mm-hmm. But as circumstances, at least for right now, turn out, and that could change obviously in the future, their relationship is now strained because Loki is very, wanting Sylvie to step back, take a moment, say, hey, look, this could have some big ramifications. Let's just step back, take a step back, consider what could happen. And presumably he's coming at this from his experiences with the TVA and Mobius, thinking along those lines now. He's been presumably changed by his journey as the He Who Remains actually mentions, saying, look, you're at the end of your journey. You should have been changed by now. So maybe he's counting on Loki to almost defend him and protect him. But Sylvie meanwhile, I should say, Sylvie wants vengeance. She strongly, like to the core of her being, has this hatred for being ripped out of her childhood, and that's what it all stems back to. It's almost like a child's need for vengeance. And with her, she doesn't care about the timeline. She doesn't care about anything. She just wants to kill the guy responsible for it. And for right now, that's He Who Remains. So consequently, it puts Loki and Sylvie at odds. Loki actively tries to block Sylvie from killing him. There was one moment where I thought was really well shot by Kate Herron, where Sylvie swings her sword toward He Who Remains, but Loki blocks it with his own neck. And you had to see the restraint she had to do to stop her blow. Like, she could have just followed through with her blow and decapitated Loki.
Yes.
But Loki was counting on how Sylvie feels about him to stop.
That was a beautiful, beautiful shot.
And then, because of all the seeds of distrust that He Who Remains has placed between the two, Sylvie realizes, that she thinks that Loki is ambitious. He just wants the throne and power for himself. But Loki is trying to convince her, no, I don't want it. I don't. I care about what happens to you. I don't, and I care about what this could do to the timeline. So, but she doesn't trust his motives. So my question to you now is, do you think she was right to not trust Loki's motives or not?
I think Loki is a very changed man because I think it makes you think of all the way back to even the first Thor movie or even the first Avengers movie, where to Loki it was all about power. It was more, should we say, the petty kind of objectives that a villain has, either rule the world or overtake the throne, or, the common tropes that a villain would have.
Right.
And I think Loki has very much matured from that. It's almost like that doesn't almost matter anymore, because he's finally, I think, his journey, like you rightfully said, I think especially throughout this with Loki
Mobius
series,
especially, yeah.
It has kind of made me more so, I think, re-examine his priorities and realize that rather than maybe attach yourself to material things of pursuing the throne or the world or anything else, there's a lot more than that. And I think it makes him a much more of a compelling character of, what are we going to do today? The same thing we do every day. Try to take over the world.
Try to take over the multiverse. Yes.
It's no longer Loki's thing. He's moved beyond that. And I think also because he has discovered love. And now his big objective is literally winning Sylvie over and maybe starting something with Sylvie, rather than I want to be the next king of Asgard. And so I think it's a curious one. I think Sylvie maybe has some maturing to do in that sense, because she's hell-bent on revenge. She hasn't overcome maybe that journey because she's been, filled with vengeance from day one, like you rightfully said, and she hasn't overcome that yet. She hasn't had that cathartic journey that Loki has, and she needs to go through that. She's almost like Loki when he was in Thor in the Avengers. She still has to go through that. And no surprise, it takes somebody like He Who Remains, who literally out-Lokis Loki in this, because he very much is a master at pitting people against each other, just like Loki did in Avengers,
right,
where he was kind of sowing the seeds of doubt when it came to the Hulk and stuff. So that's why I think Loki sees through his games, if you will, while Sylvie doesn't, because she's still in that mode. So that's kind of the way I sort of saw it, really.
Yeah, and you feel bad because, and I think I felt really bad for Loki because ultimately Sylvie betrays Loki. She kicks him through the time door back to the TVA, while she proceeds to go ahead, fulfill her vengeance, and kill, at least for now, He Who Remains.
Yeah, which actually brings me to a good part of this, Charles, because, of course, the altercation does culminate before that in the two sharing a kiss, which I'm sure a lot of folks at home were probably cheering for because they were just waiting. It's like, it'd been teased and teased and teased, and folks were like, why didn't you kiss her already? Why didn't you kiss him already? We get that, but sadly, it seems like it's more of an opportunity for Sylvie to accomplishing her goal because, like you said, she kisses him, but then says, I have other plans, and pushes him through the time door so she can kill He Who Remains. And I have to point this out, before he dies, I love that He Who Remains actually says, "See you soon," which I thought was a fabulous. Yes, I can't wait.
I'll be back.
Yes. He will return. And
He Who Remains will return in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness.
He certainly will. So, and then of course, obviously, she stabs him. But after that, of course, we cut to the TVA, and we don't know what has become of Sylvie. So, what I was wanting to ask was, were you? I'm sure you're probably expecting this outcome, but
right.
What did you think of Sylvie's actions here? And ostensibly, do you have any theories of what happened to Sylvie? Do you think she's still at the Citadel, or maybe she's been taken somewhere else, or?
Well, that's a good question, because we last time we see her, she's just there, slumped on the floor, having fulfilled her vengeance, and then essentially she's like, okay, what now?
Yeah.
But poor Loki, meanwhile, after being shunted through the time door by Sylvie's kick, he's sitting there, and I thought this was interesting because we got a moment where, Loki is by himself, and he looks very sad.
He does.
He looks genuinely hurt because, and I have to feel this is genuine because nobody else was around. Like if somebody watching him, then I would maybe have a little skepticism. But because nobody was there, I have to think he was genuinely hurt by what Sylvie did, or maybe he knew it was going to happen, but he was disappointed. But I think it's just he felt like it's almost like, that girl you like, essentially liked her vengeance more than you. So consequently, Loki feels a little hate, a little betrayed, a little injured by this, and then he gathers himself and kind of picks himself up literally off the floor and storms off to try to find Mobius or see who's left of the TVA, and that leads us to our cliffhanger with him.
Indeed, it does. I mean, I was really sort of wondering myself of, what now with Sylvie, and I think Sylvie might.
Did you think his hurt was genuine, Nick?
I do think so, because like you said, he was alone, and I think he really had his money on Sylvie in the sense that maybe now he's felt betrayal once again, and he's felt and maybe it's once again that rejection coming back, because already he'd felt, I think, rejection with Odin and
Thor,
and Thor and everybody else. Probably his mom was the only one who didn't really reject him, I think. So he feels rejection from these people.
And he killed her. So, yeah.
Exactly. So, there you go. So I think he was generally distressed about it, and probably it's like yet another kick to the groin, if you will, for poor Loki.
Oh, yeah. Now he's calling back to Sif. Yes. Excellent.
Yes. So that was kind of my thought. But, and I wonder whether Sylvie maybe actually, after she's done it, maybe does regret her choice, because, like you said, she's kind of down the floor it's almost like that "what have I done" moment. Because she sees things going nuts outside.
Yeah,
all
the timelines are branching out, and what He Who Remains, told them is coming true. That okay, you've killed me, and that's going to go unleash all this chaos.
Yeah,
and of course we're going to see the event, the resulting chaos in Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness coming soon by Marvel Studios. So, this episode does have major ramifications. Sylvie, as it turns out, is the one responsible for that. So,
that's right.
So whatever happens from this point on is going to be on her because of her actions. So I think that's going to really affect their relationship going forward. Possibly, preventing it. We don't know yet. We have yet to see what's actually going to transpire yet, but right now it's not looking good.
It certainly isn't. That's why I think she, like you mentioned, she was constantly convinced that He Who Remains was lying to her, and suddenly when she realized that he was telling the truth all along, that's why I said she kind of got that "what have I done" moment. I've kind of literally unleashed hell upon us all.
Yeah.
And so and they'll be curious to see where she actually winds up as obviously the timeline branches out. So I guess it's kind of up for grabs when it comes to that, you know, theories and what have you. So anything else on Sylvie and Loki before we get to our third and final topic and head back to the TVA, Charles?
No, it was very sad, I thought, and very tragic for both of them. I mean, you're kind of happy that Sylvie got a little vengeance for herself, but it was very fleeting. And now there's going to be ramifications for that, and we'll see what happens.
Yes, and I wonder whether Loki thinks to himself, will I ever be happy? Because every time he's happy, it gets taken away from him in some form or shape. So.
Again, Sylvie was like Lucy with the football, pulled the football away from him, and he just fell on his back. So he's hurting from this, and now he's going to be even more in trouble because once he finds out what's going on now at the TVA.
Mm-hmm. And yes, and
more over to you, Nick.
Thank you, sir. And yes, definitely more about that shortly. So topic number 3, back at the TVA, let the madness begin. So understandably, of course, Charles, we didn't get much of the TVA in this finale as the focus was, of course, on He Who Remains and the implications moving forward. But worthy of mention, after, of course, having talked to Loki and Sylvie, Miss Minutes makes a brief appearance back at the TVA, letting, of course, Ravonna know that though she did not get the file she wanted, he thinks Ravonna will find what she did give him more interesting. Mm-hmm. And, you know, judging by Ravonna's puzzled look, she has no idea who Miss Minutes is talking about. Because she's like,
who? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, he who remains. So
yes.
It's like...
But a bump. Yes.
Yes. I'll be here, all year, ladies and gentlemen. But yeah, so exactly. Thank you. So even just that kind of little moment there, Charles, I thought that was great. I mean, did you like that moment? Did you appreciate the fact that we're confirmed that Ravonna knows nothing?
Yeah, I was just going to mention that this is proof. Yeah, that Ravonna, for all her supposed knowledge, doesn't know what's really going on. She doesn't. Yeah. She doesn't know that Miss Minutes is lying to her. So consequently, she thinks she's a player. And now the question is, what was in those documents that Miss Minutes gave her?
Mm-hmm.
And did she read them before taking off and leaving Mobius in the dust? So the question is, what did she find out? Or did she actually read those or not? We don't know. But consequently, it's making Ravonna reevaluate what's going on. And she's looking for answers now.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. Because shortly after that, Ravonna gets a visit in her office from good old Mobius, who implies the kind of...
I'm back, baby.
Exactly. I love how in sync we are, Charles. This is beautiful. I love it.
Yep. That's why we podcast together so well.
That is exactly right. And of course, he gives her the whole, your reign of terror is over, and they know her secret, and he shows her the famous blue pen. And, which Charles is actually showing us right now. You can't see it, folks, but it's right there as he twiddles it in his hands like a drumstick. So he definitely could be a great drummer, I think. And
I did drum once upon a time.
And it shows. It certainly shows. And of course, though Ravonna lets on that she knew all along that everybody was a variant, she still decided to carry on the facade and the TVA's work. And then, of course, we get another little bit of a debate here, which seems to be a theme going in these Marvel TV shows, because we had the ship of Theseus, we had, of course, and this is another one, because over free will between the two and how both profess that one betrayed the other. It's like, it's your fault. No, it's your fault. I trusted you. I trusted you. And Ravonna, ostensibly says to him she's off to find free will, whatever that means. So what did you make of the exchange between Ravonna and Mobius, and what do you think Ravonna means when she's off to find free will?
Yeah, I thought it was, a very David Hume type thing. But, getting very philosophical here with our discussions of now free will into the mix. But she makes this one comment that I thought was very telling. She says that the person in charge is the one who decides free will. And then she tells Mobius, Mobius asks, where are you going to get free will? Meaning she wants to be the one in charge.
So she wants to dethrone maybe He Who Remains or whoever it is for her.
Right. She doesn't know. I don't think she knows the rules yet. She's obviously not in on everything.
Yeah.
So she may be in for a rude awakening, but maybe she's being a little ambitious here. And she's like, okay, someone's messing with me. I don't like being manipulated, so therefore I'm going to go take them out and step up and seize power. So maybe we'll finally get to get those crazy kids, Ravonna and Kang, finally together and let the romance begin.
It could be a great setup. And I kind of almost got the impression that maybe at one point Ravonna and Mobius were more than just friends.
Oh, yeah. I think that's been hinted at, that there's been a little flirtation between the two of them. She looked very fondly at his little coffee stain, the ring on her table that she gave him flack for creating because he wouldn't use coasters. So maybe she's a little wistful about it. She had the opportunity to kill him and prune him again and did not take it.
No, that's right. That's why I kind of almost got like they maybe had a relationship or something. Maybe it just didn't work out. And sometimes it happens, folks, when maybe you're dating your superior. Sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes it works. I mean, I'm not saying it always happens.
Be very careful about those workplace romances, everybody.
Yes, this is true. Especially also when you're dating your boss. Because in this case, Mobius was dating his boss.
Yeah.
So,
I hate to see what time human resources is like.
Good point. Yeah, so that's kind of the impression I got in the exchange between the two. It was literally their relationship is on the rocks, and they're playing the blame game which some couples do. It's like, it's your fault we broke up. No, it's your fault we broke up. And those kind
You
of
betrayed me. No, you betrayed me.
Yeah, and that's exactly the kind of should we say, atmosphere that I got in all this. Right. It's almost like, we used to be beautiful and all this kind of thing. So it's
hopefully somebody will get missed minutes in the custody battle.
That's right. Who will get visitation rights? I wonder. But yeah, so that was kind of the vibe I got, because almost I think at a certain point Ravonna's almost like offering the olive branch to him, saying we can do this together, and Mobius is doing the same thing. He's like, join me, we can be great and everything. I was like, maybe we were once, or something like that. So I'm right there with you when I think when she says she's off to find free will, it's probably because she's an ambitious lady, and so she wants to
be the one dictating the free will. Exactly.
Yeah.
So she's got ambition. I think that's what's coming between her and Mobius right now.
I think so too, and I kind of had to feel bad for Mobius. He looks so dejected when she kind of sort of does the walking out on him.
Right.
And I could just sort of hear a country song playing going, I'm alone, and all this kind of thing. Yeah, she's gone.
I'm the one, start playing Lost Highway by Hank Williams Sr.
Yes, that's exactly. I could
that
see
Lost Highway.
Yes, I could see him doing either that one or just Hank sitting down going, there's a tear in my beer. But anyways, so yeah, I felt bad for Mobius. Just has that very sad hang-dong.
Sometimes it's hard to be a TV agent. Giving all your love to just one Ravonna.
I love it. But yeah, so I really felt bad for him. He just looked so dejected and so kind of had the kind of that hang-dog expression. So felt bad for that moment. And yeah, so basically Ravonna's kind of off the table at this moment. And added to that, you mentioned, obviously in our trivia, we got a rather telling scene as well, which implies that things will forever be changed as Hunter B-15... Pardon me, Charles, go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm just
okay, I thought you were signaling me to stop.
No. I'm just playing with a bottle cap. Sorry.
Okay, no worries. So yeah, Hunter B-15 travels to Fremont, Ohio in 2018 and finds Ravonna Renslayer, who was a school teacher, and she tries to explain to her that everybody is a variant. So when you actually got to see this moment, what were kind of your thoughts? And were you surprised that this was actually Ravonna pre-TVA?
Yeah, because we find out that apparently she was a principal in 2018, Fremont, Ohio, which is interesting. Probably when this episode was written, they used 2018. Yes. That's probably why they chose that particular year. But Ravonna, Hunter B-15, I guess, she brings Minutemen with her, and essentially saying, "Well, look, this is, I guess, proving to them that Ravonna wasn't just, was actually taken from time, and essentially supporting her own argument, probably to the other Minutemen, saying, "Look, we were all variants taken out of time." So even Ravonna was. So I thought it was interesting, and we even get to see they make a point of like focusing for just a split second on those pens on her desk,
yes,
with which looked, it's hard to tell unless you zoom in on it, but it probably had that blue Roosevelt High School pen in there. So it was very interesting. But then because of what happens at the end of the episode, you kind of wonder what happened, because it almost like that like they just get to that point of B-15 convinces everybody, hey, look, we're all variants and we're all taken out of time, only to have at the end of the episode the timeline, at least the TVA's timeline, reset.
Yeah, because it cuts when B-15 is like saying to Ravonna, sit down, we have a lot to talk about. And that's pretty much where we cut away. So you wonder whether that's now all for naught at this point because of what happened with Sylvie killing He Who Remains, and this multiverse of madness literally happening. But I really liked it, and I did not see that coming, to be honest. And at least we got a little bit of Wumu Musaku there kind of doing her thing, and I thought we got
a little bit of understanding of, okay, so we know exactly what specific time Ravonna was taken out of.
Yeah. So it might play into future things, maybe in season 2 or later down the line, I suppose. I guess it'll be interesting to see. But yeah, I guess I just kind of felt maybe a little bit bad for B-15, who maybe got a little bit shortchanged in this episode. I mean, she got that moment, but other than that, it was a shame she didn't get as much. But I thought it was worthy of note to mention that particular moment in Fremont, Ohio.
Yeah, yeah. You kind of wonder, like, okay, are we going to go back to that scene, or is it just, it was like, oh, you're so close, and then it's taken away?
It could be a case. That could be Kate Herron saying, you would like to know what happens next, but no, we're going to...
Psych. Reset.
That's right. Sorry, it's gone forever. So I thought it was worthy of mention. And of course, here we get the big moment, because after having been set through a time door by Sylvie, Loki frantically tries to warn Mobius about He Who Remains and the threat of this impending multiversal war. But when he finally tracks down his friend and begins talking, Mobius stops him and asks him what his name is. Uh-oh!
Yep.
Clearly, Loki has ended up in an alternate version of TVA, and a variant Kang has already messed with the timeline. And we see, like Charles was mentioning, this towering statue of Kang the Conqueror at the TVA. So what did you make of our closing moment, Charles?
Well, just talking about the statues first and foremost, you noticed there were 3 Timekeeper statues that have now been replaced by a statue of what appears to be Kang the Conqueror.
Yeah.
Jonathan Major's face is there, dressed in, at least the statue is dressed in what appears to be Kang the Conqueror's costume for the comics.
Yeah.
So, not with a mask, though. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
So no helmet.
So I'm wondering if we're not going to get, Kang's, mask helmet thing. But, like his little Doctor Doom-like mask thing. But maybe at some point, hopefully. But then also, it's that big twist. It's like oh, hey, Loki, you're back. And only to find out, well, guess what? Mobius and Hunter B-15 have been reset.
If they have no idea who
They have
you
no
are.
idea who you are. Mobius thinks that Loki's must be an analyst by the way he's dressed. And
Yes.
so he's like, "Who are you again?" And so it's like, "No." So
So
consequently,
do you think
that means
it's a
that
time? Yeah.
that also resets Loki's relationship with Mobius. Loki
It's back
remember
to square one.
back to square one, but only Loki remembers their relationship, but Mobius doesn't.
Yeah. So do you think it's a reset, or do you think this is literally another version of the TVA, one of the branches of the timeline?
Well, it's a good question. We don't know because either the timeline has been overwritten, because time can be rewritten, as we know from Doctor Who, or
Of
it's a branch timeline, and somehow Loki, when he was shunted through that door, ended up in a like an alternate TVA.
Mhm.
But I'm guessing that the timeline was reset.
Okay.
So otherwise, it's going to get really complicated. So I think for whatever reason, it's already complicated as it is.
I think it will get even more complicated.
It'll get even more complicated. So do you think it is an alternate TVA?
My thought it might be an alternate one because I'm thinking of the whole multiverse of madness thing, which we're leading up to.
Yeah.
Granted, and it is in very much Marvel Comics fashion, or should we say even DC has done this as well with their Infinity events, with their Crisis events, pardon me. So I think it might just be that complex. I mean, it probably will, the comic book readers will probably be okay with this. Mm-hmm. I'm worried that, should we say, the moviegoers might be totally turned off if it is that complex, because we're used to this. And I'm speaking for comic book readers.
Right.
Non-comic book readers might find themselves maybe frustrated if that's the case.
Yeah, what they're doing, they're setting up some very ambitious things, and I share your concern because, if they try to embrace this too hard, they could turn off the mass audience. The non, like you said, the non-comic book reading audience in the process. So I'm a little concerned about that. They're going to have to. I hope they don't dumb it down, but they're going to have to be very careful about how they present it going forward.
True. I mean,
they're just going to have to dole it out just a little bit here, a little bit there for people to digest and understand. But we'll see. We'll see what happens. The Kang statue makes me think that you could be on something that it is an alternate TVA, because it might be the Kang statue might be a hint that they're on another Earth.
Mm-hmm.
The Kang's Earth. Like Kang is going to be coming from a different, alternate multiverse, perhaps, or a different. I guess because of the way it was phrased was that there was multiverses layered on top of multiverses on top of multiverses. When He Who Remains was going through his big explanation of how this whole thing started, so it could just be this is like another multiverse.
Yeah. So unless they play it the way they did with Endgame, where it was simple enough for folks to understand the whole time traveling stuff and everything else, it was pretty digestible, I think, even for folks who are not maybe familiar with that kind of concept, which comic book readers have encountered multiple times in their reading. But if not, as I said, it might just almost become like an event for just comic book readers. And I'm sure Disney and Marvel Studios don't want that, because you want the highest revenue possible when it comes to these films. You want it to kind of suit all palates. So there has to be maybe a happy medium here.
Well, there also, there has been a lot of science fiction movies and television that have dealt with alternate universes.
Oh, of course.
There was a TV show called Sliders, which dealt with the concept of alternate Earths. Mm-hmm. And, there's been other things, like Star Trek, where they've had, the mirror universe. So I think if you're a science fiction fan, you probably get the concept. So you're not overwhelmed by it. But it's going to be the person that isn't into sci-fi, just wants to see superheroes fighting other superheroes or villains, that may find this stuff a little over their heads, perhaps.
Maybe, I mean, yeah, because as we pointed out on this podcast multiple times how I think superhero stories are becoming more and more sophisticated and more and more complex, which I think is only for the good, because it elevates the genre.
Right.
But I think maybe the defining film will probably be the Doctor Strange sequel, because that might probably set the tempo for the rest of how complicated is it going to get.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think that's going to be a crucial movie going forward, because we know the Scarlet Witch is involved, and it seems that there's a chance that Loki might be involved now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Somehow. So we'll see what happens.
Very much so. And I believe Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness will be coming out next year, if memory serves, Charles.
I believe so, yes.
And you wonder whether Loki season 2 will take place after that, or will come out before the Doctor Strange film. I'm curious. I'm wondering.
I have to think it's going to be after. I think we'll get Loki season 2 after that.
Okay, so it might be the aftermath of that.
Because they haven't shot it yet, from what I understand. They still have to obviously find another director now that Kate Herron isn't going to be part of it. So I'm guessing it'll be after Doctor Strange.
It will be curious to see.
Yeah.
It'll be wonderful. I mean, I'm really looking forward to it myself.
Because Doctor Strange is scheduled to come out on March 25th.
Ooh, okay, so not that far away.
Not that far away, right? Here it is, July 2021 as we're recording this.
Yeah. So
I think they could very easily do Doctor Strange in March, and then pick up with Loki again either in the summer or fall of 2022.
Yeah, because we're 8 months away from Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, so it's definitely going to be wonderful to see. So, any other thoughts on this episode or things moving forward, Charles? Before we get to our favorite quotes from this episode?
No, I think we've covered a lot, but there's a lot to cover. So, we did what we could, and now it's kind of to be continued in other Marvel Cinematic Universe properties. So we'll see what happens.
I'm right there with you.
And we'll try to simplify it and explain it to you as best as we can, everybody.
We'll do our best.
That's our job here at the Fandom Zone. We're looking out for you.
We have your backs,
yes.
For sure. So when it comes to favorite quotes, Charles, were there any particular quotes from this episode that stuck out to you?
Oh, yes, definitely. So let's see. Ravona's quote, of course, free will. Only one person gets free will, the one in charge.
Nice.
Meaning, I want to be that one in charge.
Yes.
And let's see, He Who Remains, where he says, I harnessed the beast's power and began experimenting on it. I weaponized Alioth, and I ended the multiversal war. Once I isolated our timeline, all I had to do was manage the flow of time and prevent further branches, hence the TVA, hence the timekeepers and a highly efficient bureaucracy, hence ages and ages of cosmic harmony, hence you're welcome.
Very nice. And Jonathan Majors does that part so well.
Yes, he does. And lastly, let's see, I'll go with Loki and He Who Remains, where Loki says, so that's it? That's it? This is what happens at the end of time? And now you're just going to sit there with all that freedom and let us decide your fate? And He Who Remains replies, yes, yes, yes. What's the worst that can happen? You either take over and my life's work continues, or you plunge a blade in my chest and an infinite amount of me start another multiversal war. And I just end up right back here anyways. Reincarnation, baby.
I love that. Very, very nice.
How about you, Nick?
Well, when it came to me, there were a couple. When it came to Sylvie and Loki, when Sylvie says to Loki, why aren't we seeing this the same way? And Loki's like, because you can't trust and I can't be trusted. So that was very subtle.
Then I guess we're in a pickle.
Yes, we are definitely, for sure. And then another one was Ravonna and Mobius. Ravonna going, if anyone was ever going to make it back from the void, I'm suppose it was going to be you. Mobius like, oh, well, one man's void is another man's piece of cake. That was very smart. Yes.
No.
And now I want any cake available right now.
Right.
Thank you. Thank you for making me hungry.
I've got some in the fridge. So.
Oh, dang it! Yeah, and you're just way too far away. So
Leftover birthday cake from Lori. Yeah.
Ooh, nice. Well, I'm sure it's definitely going to be delicious. If you can mail me a piece, I'd appreciate it. But
it might not stay fresh. I don't know.
It might not travel too well.
No.
And finally, the Loki and Sylvie, another little brief one is when they actually see He Who Remains. Loki's like, "He who remains," and Sylvie's like, "Not for much longer." So that was kind of nice. So it's definitely quite a few quotes there. Moving on, Fandom Zone news. Charles, did you have any particular interesting pieces of news for us?
I didn't. It's been a very slow period for me. I don't know. Did you have anything, Nick?
Not really. I mean, aside, of course, from this wonderful announcement that we will be getting Loki season 2, but, folks who watched the episode know that. But other than that, no, I think everything's kind of hanging around the conventions and what have you, because I think all the big reveals will be then.
Yeah, I know DC has their big fandom event scheduled for later in the year. There's San Diego Comic-Con coming up, although the Marvel Studios and Warner Brothers are passing on that this year again. So we won't, we probably have to wait to get some more news, like major news. So we'll see what happens, but yeah, this is very kind of a dry period, unfortunately.
It's a bit of a lean moment now for big news. So I guess that takes us then right to our Fandom Zone fan mail, which is pretty abundant this time around.
Well, do we want to give a rating for this episode?
Oh, pardon me. Yes, this is true. Let's go to ratings before we get to the mail. What do you give this season finale, Charles?
Well, in acknowledgement of the people that are frustrated because it wasn't a little more, it was so a little bit, as Mobius likes to say, talky. I'll give it 9 out of 10 Kang the Conqueror statues.
Well, it seems like we're in sync, because I'm also going to give this 9 out of 10 Evil Miss Minutes.
Yeah.
So, and I actually had to follow that up with a bonus question, though,
okay.
Charles. Now that we've had...
Is there a Mr. Minutes? I'm kind of curious.
Well,
little baby minutes, perhaps? Seconds? Little seconds, perhaps?
It is Mr. Hours, Miss Minutes, and the little seconds. There you go.
There you go. All right.
But no, in fact, I could almost see Miss Minutes doing like Mr. Potato Head going, Mr. Minutes, Mr. Minutes, Mr. Minutes.
Nice. Very nice Toy Story reference there.
Of course, well, it's Disney after all. No, my bonus question was, which I know some folks have kind of done.
Let's go on to the bonus question.
That's right, bonus round. So, as we've had our first seasons of our MCU TV shows, so of course we've had WandaVision, we've had Falcon Winter Soldier, and Loki.
Yeah.
If you were to put these on a podium, who would you give the gold medal? Who would get the silver, and who would get the bronze? I know it's a tough question, but
it is a tough question. I know that WandaVision obviously rolled in the Emmy nominations this week, 23 if I recall correctly, which is just one less than The Mandalorian, which was leading with The Crown. So WandaVision was a spectacular production, but I'm actually going to go with Loki. As so
Loki gets the gold.
Loki gets the gold standard, if you will. Then I'll give WandaVision the silver, and Falcon the Winter Soldier obviously gets the bronze. How about you?
Well, I thought we had to ask this question also because the Olympics are coming up as well. So I thought I'd nice little Olympics tie there. I'm going to actually give WandaVision the gold. Loki gets the silver, and the Falcon Winter Soldier gets the bronze. I enjoyed them all.
Yes.
But I guess, if it comes to, like this silly sort of ratings thing that we do when it comes to what was best, that's probably where I would go. So, so that's mine when it comes to that. So
that's how you rank them. Okay.
Yeah. So moving on, of course, Fandom Zone fan mail, as I said, being a finale, it seems like a lot of folks chimed in, and we're very, very happy about that. And so I think we could actually start with David K. Proctor. And Charles, I believe you have Dave's email to hand, so take it away.
Yes, we do. So Dave Proctor, as we like to call him here in the Fan Zone, because we're cool like that. We get to know him as Dave.
Yes.
Dave writes in, and he's been away for a while, so kudos, Dave, for writing in. Appreciate it. Missed you. Hello, Nick and Charles.
Hey,
Hello.
Dave.
Hey, Dave. I've been falling behind in my emails. I apologize for this, but life sometimes gets in the way of what we love. Yes, it does. I know that all too well. I have truly enjoyed this podcast and its discussion of the Loki series. This series is fantastic and goes to places I have never read about when I was really into comics as a kid. I do love my comic books, but I don't get to read nearly as many as I used to. Well, that's sad to hear, but there's always time for comics. You should always make time for comics, as far as I'm concerned. I'm 52, and I still make time for comics. Just saying. I've also enjoyed the two of you digging into the background information, the trivia, and all the minutiae that goes into making a show like Loki. Thank you, Dave. Mm-hmm. I feel like it enhances the experience.
We appreciate that.
Thank you. Yeah. Yeah, this is the Fandom Zone experience. I know that the Marvel Comics universe is transitioning to a new phase where we see new actors and new characters, and a lot of our old favorites will go away. At least they will go away as the main focus. There are some characters I doubt we will see again, and plenty who have died in the universe. This is sad, but is also exciting that we get to see new heroes come to the forefront.
Agreed.
Well, I would argue that those characters we will continue to see, although some of them will be benched for a while. And eventually we will see them recast by other actors.
Well, like there have been numerous Captain Americas, other Iron Men, right. So it can happen. Other Black Widows.
For the meantime, though, there are multiple other characters in that role.
Yeah.
So, and that's, I think, what the Marvel Cinematic Universe is doing. But I think eventually some fans will want to see Steve Rogers. They will want to see Tony Stark again. And eventually they will recast those roles. It's just a matter of time, as we found out here in Loki.
Well said, yes.
Yes. So, have heart, everybody, if you're a fan of those characters. Sylvie may take over for Loki, or Loki may continue as they may join up and can both continue, or perhaps neither. It keeps you guessing. The comic books run into problems when they have a teenager such as Spider-Man who remains a teenager for 30 years and they don't age. This causes a logistical problem. In real life, the limitations are that the actors age out of parts they play, which is why they could get recast, right?
Exactly.
Loki and other Asgardians seem immortal to humans and in comics could remain one age forever. Yeah, the Thor characters probably have the advantage there.
True.
Because of their immortality. Disney and Marvel have done a good job of making this flow, and the transitions are made exciting and anticipated. Good job. I have transitioned to being someone who can tell my friends about what is probably going to happen and who we are going to see to someone who is just enjoying the ride.
Nice.
I enjoy the know-it-all mantle that my family and friends put me on. They will ask me about characters and events, and I have been able to answer with authority. Now I have been able to keep this up only because Nick and Charles have given me the information that I then pass to my friends.
Oh, we like that we are like a recognized source, Charles. That's wonderful.
We contribute to Dave being a know-it-all. All right. Thanks, thanks, guys. Well, you're very welcome, Dave.
Welcome.
Also, thanks for turning me on to Happiness and Darkness, the superhero podcast. I really enjoyed the discussion of Black Widow that I was a part of with Nick, and Nick was very kind enough to have me on with Maz. I got to meet him. That was a lot of fun. So everybody should check that out on Happiness and Darkness. I'm just saying. Dave continues, I'm going to be deep diving into some back episodes for a while. I feel like the man at Sutter's Mill in 1848, California, who has just found the mother lode. Well, if you're going to be digging for gold or panning for gold, maybe you should be listening to the Gold Standard as well, Dave.
Thank you, Charles.
You like what I did there?
I very much appreciated it, yes.
Keep up the awesome work. I depend on it. Thanks, David K. Proctor. Well, thank you, Dave. And, we depend on you. We depend on listeners like you. So you keep listening. We'll keep making them, Dave. That's how this works.
That's exactly true. That's why it is called the Fandom Zone.
All right.
Secondly,
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say go ahead. I was going to set you up for Holly Mack, who also wrote it in.
The wonderful, then dedicated Holly McMillan, of course, who writes in, "Hey, Nick and Charles, man, what an episode. The opening with the Marvel screen and a lot of the lines from the MCU movies going on was a nice touch. It certainly was. That makes sense now after seeing the episode. Indeed. I have to say, I wasn't expecting Sylvie's betrayal of Loki, and I think Loki wasn't expecting it either. And
Curse your sudden and inevitable betrayal.
Yes. The backdrop where the Citadel at the end of time was gorgeous, reminding me a bit of the Bifrost. Creative timeline work sounds ominous to me. Of course, just slightly. Of course, Miss Minutes would be the right-hand gal for He Who Remains, and that He Who Remains has variants. Not sure if he's as bad as Thanos or worse. He might actually be in the worst pile, I think. Guess we'll find out. So glad that Loki got renewed for a second season.
Yay.
I'm also really looking forward to the other MCU movies to see how much what happened in season 1 of Loki plays a part in them. I think it's going to play a big part. Yep. I'll wrap it up here. Holly from Wisconsin. Well, thank you so much, Holly.
Yeah, thank you, Holly. We always love hearing from you, and yeah, we'll see how they connect. I mean, hopefully it would be nice for those of us who have watched Loki to see a lot of those elements play on screen, but like we would be in on certain things that perhaps the people who didn't watch might not be a part of. So we'll see how that plays out. I'm guessing it's going to be at least a good part of it, especially where Kang is concerned.
Oh, most certainly, and I'm sure the folks at Marvel Studios want you to watch these for that reason. It's like you have a reason to watch them if you want to understand the MCU movies. And last but certainly not least, we have good old Ray writing in.
Hey, Ray.
Actually writing on our Facebook page, or rather our messenger. So, really appreciate it. Indeed, hey, Ray. So Ray starts, hi, Charles and Nick. Hope you're both doing. Hey Ray, I hope you're both doing well, and I want to drop some of my thoughts on the season finale to Disney Plus's Loki. Overall, I was gobsmacked by episode 6. That brought a very considered end to the season, whilst at the same time making giant strides in the greater scheme of the MCU. Let's address that elephant in the room first. Kang. Jonathan Majors, I thought, at first did a very hammy performance of a Marvel villain, and initially I wasn't too enamored. Having had the episode run its course and having reflected further, I'm even more excited to see other variants of He Who Remains, namely the diabolical Kang the Conqueror. I got that the variant of Kang that Sylvie killed wasn't the Kang the Conqueror.
Right,
he wasn't.
Correct.
So Major's portrayal made sense and has me waiting eagerly for him to show his range as an actor. Yes, indeedy. Sticking to this theme of Kang, I feel that it tied up the season well as it played out Sylvie's arc for accomplishing her mission. She certainly does this with dire consequences for the rest of us, but she does so nevertheless. I absolutely loved it, but I do wonder how non-comic book readers or those who don't keep up with the news, i.e. Major's cast as Kang, would have received this finale. By all intents, it lacked the thrills of episode 5, and not knowing who He Who Remains is may seriously crimp the experience of those who are not familiar with Kang.
Right.
This is true. Still, I like to believe that with the promise of a season 2, this would assuage any fears for any loose plot threads and that more answers are to come. The oh no moments of Mobius not recognizing Loki was a big one, as was the departure of Renslayer, both of which will be rich to explore in the next season. All in all, Loki for me has a surprise hit, one which I rate up there with WandaVision. The concept of the TVA and now the tie to Kang have made this an original and important series to have watched. And all I can say is that I now have full trust in Marvel, as they've proven 3 times now that their TV shows work wonderfully.
Exactly.
Indeed they do.
Yep.
Again, I wonder how effectively for those who aren't that comic book savvy, but hey, I can only speak for myself on this one. Keep up the great work, guys. Your show is awesome and is massively comforting in this lockdown period that I and my state are currently in. As Ray writes to us from Australia, who recently went under lockdown. Podcasts are beacons of enjoyment, and you guys are testament to that, without a doubt. All the best, Ray.
Well,
Thank you so much for that, Ray.
That was very nice, Ray. So, yeah, getting a lot of love here today for the Phantom Zone. So thank you, guys. We'd love to hear that, and we're doing what we can. We're trying to entertain and inform and, And, so all the love that you're giving us, we give that definitely right back to all of you out there in podcast land.
Amen for sure. And yes, definitely want to send a shout out to Ray and all the folks in the land of Oz, in good old Australia.
Oh, down under, yes.
Hopefully things will get better as they went under lockdown. But we appreciate that we can keep them entertained during this rather difficult period for the Aussies, indeed. So, of course, if you want to be like the wonderful trio that are Holly, Dave, and Ray, and share your thoughts with us, please do so by shooting us an email at fandomzonecast@gmail.com. Once again, that magical email is fandomzonecast@gmail.com. Feel free to follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter. We appreciate your follows and support. And Charles, when it comes to you, when you're not chilling here in the Fandom Zone and embracing all this love from our listeners, where can our fine listeners find you?
Well, of course, you can find me when you're not listening to us here in the Phantom Zone by checking me out at Charles Skaggs on Twitter, at Charles Skaggs on Instagram, Facebook, of course, Charles Skaggs in Hilliard, Ohio, and my blog of geeky things.
Damn good coffee. And hot.
Damn good coffee and hot, where I talk about all the stuff we talk about here on the Phantom Zone podcast. So all kinds of comic book news, comic book TV news about the podcast for the Southgate Media Group, including, Next Stop Everywhere, the Doctor Who podcast that I do with Nick and assorted wonderful special guest companions who join me from time to time as we talk Doctor Who, Torchwood, the Sarah Jane Adventures, Big Finish audios, and more. And coming up this coming week is actually going to be talking to a certain Dave Proctor.
Yay!
So Dave makes his long-awaited return back to the Phantom Zone as we're going to discuss The Hand of Fear, which was a classic from the Tom Baker era, which featured the departure of Elizabeth Sladen, who played Sarah Jane Smith. And pretty good episode. I love that story. I actually was watching part of it today, and I think it's going to be a really fun discussion. Now, of course, sure. Elizabeth Sladen returned later on, excuse me, to Doctor Who, in the modern era, but for right now, we're watching the story from the 70s. This was her original departure from the series, and looking forward to having Dave back on the podcast. So please tune in. And then also Ghost with the Twin Peaks podcast, where Zan Sprouse, my wonderful co-host, and I talk all things David Lynch and Twin Peaks. And unfortunately, we were planning to talk our special 100th episode with DJ Nick joining us for his very first time in Ghostwood Forest, as we were going to watch the Twin Peaks pilot, the European version of the Twin Peaks pilot, which has an alternate ending. But sadly, Zan has fallen ill, and so we're going to have to delay our recording of that, but hopefully we will get to that hopefully in the next couple weeks. So please stay tuned for Ghostwood's 100th episode. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun as we all watch that wonderful pilot and the alternate ending together. And Nick gets to tell us how wonderful we are in Ghostwood for a change.
Yes, I'll be saying
or at least how
phrases.
Wonderful Zan is on Ghostwood. Charles, you can Charles, you can take a leave, but Zan is the important one.
No.
And then, of course, Drunk Cinema, where Zan and I, this is our side gig. We just recently discussed, we've done RoboCop, and we just did Pee-wee's Big Adventure, which had a lot of fun with that. And then coming up for our next episode, at least as long as Zan is up to it, we're going to be discussing Superman the movie, the 1978 classic, which was also the very first thing that Nick and I talked about on the Happiness and Darkness back in the day. So we're going to be doing this in honor of the late, great Richard Donner, director of Superman the movie, because I owe him so much, because Superman the movie is my all-time favorite comic book movie. And this is going to be our way, albeit with adult beverages, of paying tribute to that. So I hope everybody tunes in when we get that recorded. So, Nick, how about you? Because I know that we're going to be discussing some things on another podcast coming up. But where can everybody find you out there in the wonderful podcast land or out there on the interwebs?
And yes, there's definitely some great announcements. And when it comes to me, folks, I do host the radio show Whiskey and Cigarettes, where we play all sorts of country music under the sun. For more information about that, you can visit our website, whiskeyandcigarettesshow.com. Podcast-wise, if superhero movies are your speed, I do also host Happiness in Darkness, the aforementioned Happiness in Darkness, where we, of course, discuss all superhero movies under the sun and more. You can find us on Facebook and Twitter. And last but certainly not least, speaking of Zan Sprouse, of course, we wish a very speedy recovery for sure. Has been under the weather. We care about her greatly.
Get well soon, Zan.
Exactly. Hopefully your ears are burning because we are wishing you the very best unless you get to listen to this, but we definitely wish you all the best. And her, myself, and Rachel Friend discuss on Gold Standard all the Best Picture winners in chronological order from 1927's Wings to the present day. Coming up, we will be discussing the 1956 picture Around the World in 80 Days, starring David Niven and Katin Flass, which will be definitely quite the interesting discussion for sure. You can find that more about that on Facebook and Twitter. And when it comes to this show, next time on episode 226 of the Fandom Zone, I will actually leave up to my partner in crime here to give you the goods. Charles, what's coming up for the Fandom Zone and beyond when it comes to you and I?
Well, for episode 226, we had planned to discuss the pilot episode of Resident Alien, which was based on the Dark Horse comic book limited series by Peter Hogan and Steve Parkhouse. And joining us for that, because this was essentially her request, Zan Sprouse. So we're not sure because, like I said, Zan's having some health issues right now. So we're going to have to kind of play the scheduling by ear. So if we're not right away with this episode, please forgive us. But we're hoping to have that done before August because in August, Nick and I are going to be temporarily leaving the Fandom Zone for a little bit because we're going to be switching back over to, you guessed it, Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. Because at long last, we're getting Titans Season 3 on HBO Max. So we have to talk that because we got a lot of fans on Titan Talk, the Titans podcast. Hopefully you're some of them as well out here on the Fandom Zone. Hopefully we get a little crossover action as far as our listeners go. So if you want to keep listening to Nick and I, please check us out on Titan Talk, the Titans podcast, coming up in August very, very soon. And how about you, Nick? Are you going to be looking forward to our discussion as we move over after, hopefully, we talk this Resident Alien pilot with Zan?
Well, I'm so excited. Hopefully, we will get to have this lovely chat with Zan as well, because folks who have heard her know that she is a wonderful, wonderful contributor and just a great podcaster in her own right. So I'm definitely crossing fingers that will be the case.
Right.
When it comes to Titan Talk, I'm so excited about that. I know we will have a lot of cleaning to do in Titan's Tower, Charles, because that place, I've heard complaints that, there's the fridge is kind of smelling, there's rats all over the place, and the cobwebs have just gathered. So I think we're going to have to either...
Wasn't it your turn to empty the fridge? I'm pretty sure it was your turn to empty the fridge.
Dang it! Yes. I have to admit it's my fault. It's my fault, exactly, because I kind of left all that lovely good food, which has now gone to waste. But yes, I think we'll have to send the exterminators in before we actually hop into Titan's Tower to discuss the next season of Titans.
Well, I went ahead and put a fresh coat of paint on the podcast because I went ahead and redesigned our profile and wallpaper. So try to slap on a new season 3 fresh coat of paint. Hope everybody appreciates it. And we're getting ready. We're pulling the furniture covers off, and we're getting the broom out and sweeping up and getting everything back on track in Titans Tower. So stay tuned, everybody. It's going to be a lot of fun as we talk Titans Season 3.
Exactly. It's going to be all clean and pristine to welcome back our listeners into Titan Tower with us.
And I hope all of you join us over there as well. Yes.
Yes, we're making this special for you guys. We're going to have the donuts and the pretzels and the beer and all sorts of stuff. So it's going to be wonderful. So just be sure to join us, definitely.
Exactly.
That's it, of course, folks. We'll see you next time. I want them so badly too, Charles, and I just can't have access.
You mentioned cake. You mentioned donuts. I'm getting hungry because I haven't had dinner yet, Nick.
Yes, so we'll be sort of now send Charles off to dinner, as folks. We will see you, of course, next time with hopefully episode 226 and the pilot of Resident Alien, or if not, on the Titan Talk. Until then, keep watching the skies, and thank you for listening. Ciao, everybody.
For all time, always.